Let me ask you this. When has the Chinese government or Chinese society apologized for or condemned any of its bad actions? I'm talking about apologizing for bad actions in the past and in the present. We see China constantly cite bad actions of the West that have been acknowledged and already addressed, taught about in school and condemned by society. Things like slavery, racism, gun crime, genocide of Native Americans, the atrocities of the Vietnam War, Agent Orange, napalm, all the defects. These are things that are taught in Western schools and in American schools to children to give them an example of what must never be repeated in the future. These atrocities are talked about openly and discussed as being bad. They are not accepted as being good. In China, however, it is the opposite. The past evils by the current communist government, the same government that's in power today, are praised and seen as necessary steps towards the formation of glorious China. Will the Chinese government admit that it made mistakes by implementing the Great Leap Backwards and the cultural devolution that led to the death and starvation of 30+ million people? No, they blame natural disasters and foreign powers. Killing all the sparrows is not a natural disaster. Telling the farmers to stop farming and make steel instead is not a natural disaster. No foreign powers forced Mad Mao to destroy China's culture and history. Mao strives for no less than a new world order. In 1957, he orders a campaign against sparrows for allegedly eating too much rice and grain. Damned creature, criminal for 1,000 years. Today is Payments Day. That's a contemporary poem by, at the time, about sparrows. Hundreds of thousands of Chinese keep drumming for hours, terrifying the sensitive birds and keeping them in the air, so that finally they die due to exhaustion. This is true. The bizarre logic behind this: millions of dead sparrows saving tons of rice and grain for the people. Finally, about 2 billion sparrows were killed, and as a consequence, insects and vermins proliferate rapidly. So you have locusts and various other things which the sparrows would eat, now eating all the grain. So they have to take the sparrows off the list and put cockroaches instead. Therefore, China has to import sparrows from the Soviet Russia to fight the plague of verminous insects that are eating all the grains. So you see, this bizarre Mao logic led to massive amounts of starvation. Kill all the sparrows! That's a great idea. It was a self-inflicted wound. Will the Chinese government admit that the Tiananmen Square massacre that saw countless university students mowed down and killed by the military was a bad thing? Nope, never have, never will. In fact, you're not even allowed to talk about it in China. Out of sight, out of mind, it's the Communist Party's way. Will the Chinese government admit that stealing intellectual property is bad? Since every single thing in modern China is a copy or a knockoff, including all military hardware, technology, roads, factories, buildings, infrastructure, etc., they are all copies or derivatives invented by other nations. No, it will defend the thieves because the Chinese Communist Party itself are thieves. In fact, even the CCP, the Communist Party of China, is a Western idea. Even communism is a stolen Western ideology. Karl Marx was not Chinese. Will the Chinese government admit that its bad actions allowed COVID-19 to spread around the globe, killing our families and destroying our economies and ways of life?
It is unreasonable to demand China to apologize for the coronavirus outbreak. So far, there's been no clear conclusion about the origin of the virus.
No, they cast blame on the USA, Italy, and others, even going so far as to pretend that it originated in the USA.
It's first discovered in Wuhan, but I can't say it originated from Wuhan.
And was imported into China. Chairman Xi disappeared for weeks, hoping that things would just die down and disappear like him. But now suddenly, somehow the world is blaming Trump and the USA for how COVID has decimated the world. No, it is China's fault. It originated from China, and whistleblowers were arrested and forced to sign confessions. The spread of this pandemic was the CCP's fault, but China will never apologize for unleashing this horror upon the world. Will the Chinese government admit that not having animal cruelty laws is bad? That brutal slaughter of dogs by torturing them to death is bad? No. They will call the rest of the world racist for calling out this barbaric behavior of stealing pets and torturing them to death. Will the Chinese government admit that destroying the world's environment through outdated and banned forms of manufacture and industry are bad? Using harmful and internationally banned chemicals that destroy the ozone layer, unsustainable fishing and wildlife poaching worldwide, dumping more plastics in the ocean than anywhere else? No. They will justify their bad behavior by blaming past industrial revolutions abroad, not mentioning that China's industrial revolution could be far cleaner and far better given the fact that we now understand the environmental costs and impacts. Things that were not understood when the British Industrial Revolution took place. Not to mention that if it wasn't for the British Industrial Revolution and others around the world, China would have nothing to build and no knowledge of how to do it. This will be a hard pill for many mainland Chinese people to swallow. Bad behaviors that we see in the present, like the grab hags that I've been posting on my Instagram for this past week. Yes, it's been grab hag week. This is what's happening in modern China. This is not civilized behavior. This is something that you as a Chinese person should condemn and not make excuses for. Yes, we all understand that people were starving during Mad Mao's reign, where he destroyed Chinese culture and made everyone eat each other and basically go into this horrible, disgusting form of poverty. And it's terrible. If you see any of the real footage and pictures of what really happened during that time, it will appall you. Anyone who's got a civilized bone in their body. The Chinese people have been subjected to some of the worst leadership throughout history. It's awful. But that's not an excuse for being uncivilized. You cannot keep blaming the past. This is what's happening now. You need to apologize for it and you need to fix it. If it's not your fault, you still have to acknowledge that it's bad. If you're not a bad actor, it's just like everywhere else in the world. I don't go around making excuses for apartheid. I come from South Africa. I know it was bad. It was abolished for a reason. There was outrage against it for a reason. You don't see people going around saying how good it was to genocide the Native Americans in America. They don't make excuses for it. They acknowledge that it was bad. They apologize for it. This is how we move on. This is what a civilization does. Now, Chinese nationalists will come into the comment section and say, China has 5,000 years of history. It's the most civilized, civilization ever. No, mainland China only has about 70 years of history. And we all know this because Mao Zedong destroyed Chinese culture. If you want to see real Chinese culture, unfortunately, you have to go to places like Taiwan and Hong Kong, where you can still see Chinese culture, real Chinese culture, before it was destroyed and all religions were crushed and all history was taken away. 5,000 years of being a grab hag doesn't make being a grab hag civilization. You have to understand. 5,000 years of doing something bad does not make it good. So, the bad parts of Chinese culture that we see today, the selfishness, the lack of empathy and compassion towards your fellow man, the lack of care towards the environment, these are bad, not civilized, and are not worthy of a culture that's supposed to have 5,000 years of history. It's time for the good people of mainland China to stand up and stop accepting this bad behavior. Why do you allow it to continue in front of your eyes? Why do you keep making excuses for it? I understand that you cannot stand against the government. It's impossible to stand against the government in China because they will destroy you and your family. But when you see grab hags going at it at the buffet, surely you can step in and tell them that they are being uncivilized, uncultured, and they're embarrassing the whole of China. Surely you can do that, right? Let's stop excusing bad behavior, whataboutism, pushing blame to the West and to other places. Look within China. I talk about China, by the way, not the USA. Not yet anyway. Occasionally I will. But these guys who come on and say, oh yeah, what about USA this? What about Black Friday? What about this? Guess what? It doesn't matter what other people do. This is a China problem. And when you look at it like that, and you look at it, you say, look, this is what happens in China. These are Chinese citizens doing this. You can't refute it. It doesn't matter if other people are jumping around doing something somewhere else. I'm talking about China. Now, are you going to fix your problems, or are you going to keep excusing them and for the rest of history until the world's entire environment is destroyed? I don't think so. Anyway, until next time, you know the drill, guys. If you're a good person who's against this kind of bad behavior and who doesn't make excuses for your own bad actions and the bad actions of others, stay awesome. Oh, and one more thing. If somebody is a murderer and is killing someone right now, and you drag him aside and you say, what the hell, you need to go to jail, and they say, nope, I don't have to go to jail because I was abused as a child, or having some stupid excuse. I mean, sure, it's valid excuses to be messed around and 100 years of humiliation, or, opium wars or whatever else. It doesn't change the fact that you're a murderer right now, and these bad actions need to be addressed. Anyway, that's all I have to say. See you next time, guys. Stay awesome.